I've known you as a kid, and I have lived in the goodness of God. Yeah. And all my life you have been faithful. Oh, and all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I sing with everything, if I sing for you, my King. Come on, lift your voice. I can't imagine why I would do this all for high, 'cause it's all to lift you high. I want to see the whole room jump. In 1, 2, yeah, 1, 2, 3, go.
Good morning, Grace Church. Can we stand together and worship the Lord this morning? Hallelujah. Let's just begin to enter in and give the Lord praise this morning. How many know we serve El Shaddai, not just get by? What do you need this morning? The Lord our God is able to deliver. He's able to give you whatever you need. We serve Jehovah Shazek, the Lord our strength. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord our healer. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord our provider. Come on, let's just give him some praise this morning. Hallelujah.
I was buried beneath my shame, and who could carry that kind
Oh,
of
let's clap our
weight?
hands.
It was mine too, till I met you. And I was breathing, but not alive. And all my failures I tried to hide. It was mine too, till I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. Now your mercy has saved my soul. Now your freedom is all that I know. The old made new, Jesus, when I met you, you called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day.
Hello, Grace Church. I'm David Baker, your church board secretary, and it's already October, believe it or not, which means that Halloween and Thanksgiving and Christmas are just right around the corner. Well, it also means, since we're in October, that we're in Pastor Appreciation Month. And so I wanted to take an opportunity to ask you all to remember our pastors, all of our pastors and all the things that they do for us that we're thankful for. I ask you to remember them throughout this month. And that could be in a lot of different ways. We're going to have baskets on tables at the back of the sanctuary every Sunday, so you could drop a note, drop off a gift card if you wanted to, write a letter. I think we're going to have some cards back there. If you wanted to give some money, you could take one of these and you could write on there in the other field, Pastor Appreciation, and give that. You could give online. We're going to have that available as well. And but most importantly, I'm sure they would appreciate your prayers. So with that, if you would, just throughout this month especially, which we want to do it all the time, but throughout this month especially, just ask that you continue to remember our pastors and remind them that you're thankful for them.
Can you hear me now? All right. It's great to be in the house of the Lord this morning. Amen? Oh, come on. Y'all have had more coffee than that. It's great to be in the house of the Lord this morning, right? Yeah, all right. All right, we got a couple of announcements for you. First thing, if you are new to Grace Church, we have a QR code that you can scan, and you can put your information there. We'd love to be able to reach out to you and to see how your week's going, to say thank you for stopping by. So we want to do that. Also, if you have to update information, you can also use that QR code and treat it like you're a new member, and we'll take your information and we can update it in our system. That way we have your correct address, phone number, email, all that stuff. Sometimes we get people saying, I didn't get the email. Well, we got your wrong email address in there. So you can use that QR code. We also have connection cards that are in the back of the seats in front of you and out there at the welcome desk as well that you can fill out. Any of those three ways are good ways that we can get your contact information or update your contact information. The second announcement that we have is there is no Wednesday night activities here at the church. It is fall break, so we want you to go and enjoy being with your family and spend that time with them. So if you show up at church on this Wednesday, you're going to be alone. So good luck. And the next announcement that we have is Trunk or Treat is coming. So we want you guys to participate in that, whether you are here with your children or if you want to decorate a trunk. We have some examples that go through the slides before the church service of what you can do, to give you an idea of what you can do, decorate your trunk with. Also, I was informed that the Oriental Trader has trunk kits. You can buy just a kit for $50 off the Oriental Trader. And so that way you don't have to think of anything to do. You can just buy a kit and put it on there and you're good to go. So that's an idea for you guys as well. One final announcement, and this one is for the Men of Grace. We have the men's retreat coming up. It is October 22nd and 23rd, a Friday and a Saturday. It's not a typical style retreat. It is going to be coming here Friday night. We're going to have some teaching and we're going to have some fun, and then you're going to go home and spend the night at your house, and then you'll come back here Saturday morning. We're going to have some breakfast, have some more teaching, have some more fun, and then we'll end it all with a big grill out. So we're going to have a good time. The theme is leadership. So the retreat's called Lead the Charge. And we live in a world right now that tells us to mind our own business, stay in our lane. So in today's world, how do you do Christian leadership? What should Christian leadership look like? And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And I think that's a very crucial aspect that as men in the world, what we should be doing in our world and our communities around us. That's it for the announcements. We're going to dive back into the worship. Before we do that, please stand and say hi to those around you.
hearts that burn with holy fear, purified in faith and deed, refine us by strength in what we need. So we the church who bear your light, lamp of flame, city bright, King and kingdom come is what we pray. We need a fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, and pour your spirit out. A holy anointing, the power of your presence. Pour your spirit out, and 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 pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. We need a fresh
We can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Move upon our praise. Sons and daughters sing. We can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Let all the redeemed prophesy and sing. We can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Move upon our praise. Sons and daughters sing. We can hear the wind blowing, blowing.
We need a fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. A holy anointing, the power of your presence. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. And all my days I've been held in your hand. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the
bow your heads and close your eyes for just a moment? Jesus, we just want to thank you for the goodness of who you are. For all my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Lord, every step of the way you've been there. Every time that we took a step, you were there. Every time we fell, you were there. Every time we rejoiced, you were there. Every time we were sad, and you were there. Every time we felt like we couldn't go on, you were there. For you have carried us and walked with us. And so this morning, we just want to say that we thank you and that we love you. Lord, I know that there are many things going on. There are many burdens that are on our shoulders this morning. And as much as I love singing about how you've always been there, Lord, I'm thankful you're here today. I'm thankful that you are the one that carries us today. You're the one that encourages us today. So, Lord, whether the burdens are physical things or maybe it's a spiritual battle, for the relationship issues, Lord, the marriages, so many other things. God, we thank you for your goodness. And now, Lord, as we continue on, I pray that this morning that you would speak to us in your own fresh way. For that's why we're here. We confess that we need you. We confess that without you there is no life. We confess, Lord, that we need our eyes retuned to focus in on you. So I pray that the distractions of this world, the things that are negative in our lives, Lord, whatever it may be, I pray today that they may fall into the background as we turn our eyes on you. And may we, by the time that we're done here, may we say it's been good to be in God's house. And I pray this in Jesus' great name. And everyone said, amen and amen. You may be seated. Well, we have a great day, and I'm going to kind of grab my little table over here and get some things going. Today is another great day to be in God's house as we get a chance to continue and move forward in on our series that we've been going through, and we've been talking about the 7 deadly sins. This is actually week number 3. And the first week, we just kind of introduced it just a little bit. We began to look at it just a little bit. And then the next week, last week, we talked about something different, which was pride. And we began to define sin in a very specific way. We said that the biblical definition of sin isn't something necessarily that you do. And we often think of big sins. We often think of all the different things that are going on in our life. But the big definition of sin is simply missing the mark. And so missing the mark is Jesus. That's what we're trying to become like, is more like Jesus each and every day. And whenever we miss that mark, that's where sin is. When we fail at that point, and some of us go, well, how in the world am I ever supposed to be like that? There's no way I can do that. Well, that's why we spent about 6 weeks before even we started this talking about the grace of God, that this is a journey that we have been invited into, a journey that we get a chance to know that we're a part of, that God has invited us and said, I want you to walk with me. And as you walk with me, then literally what you'll be able to do is become more and more like me, that you'll think like me, you'll see like me, you'll speak like me, because I am the target. I'm the goal of life, is to grow into Him and allow Him to fill us so much that we live like Him. And so we started talking about these 7 deadly sins, and just kind of a quick reminder, they're the 7 deadly sins there. Pride, envy, sloth, lust, gluttony, anger, and greed. And what we know is that as we begin to do that, we just begin to say, okay, we're going to cover these week by week. But some of us begin to say, well, what makes them deadly? Because they don't seem very deadly, do they? In fact, most of us at some point, at some level, we begin to say, well, everybody's probably dealt with these at some point, and it's not like if I eat an extra donut that I'm going to die, so why in the world would they call them the 7 deadly sins? Why would we be talking about these if everybody kind of deals with these at some point? Well, it all started way back a couple centuries ago. A 4th century monk was some monks were reading and studying and praying, and they began to notice people, and they began to say, listen, these are some things that we notice that people deal with. But these aren't things that people think about. They aren't things that the big stuff that people typically think about. What they are is the attitudes on the inside. We often think about the 10 Commandments, and sometimes we think that what ought to happen is we ought to be able to just kind of put these in a category that maybe is on the opposite side of the 10 Commandments, but it's different than that. These are the things that inhabit the inside of us that we begin to look and say, we got to watch for this stuff. In fact, one of the reasons we started talking about it in the beginning was even Will Willimon, who once upon a time, wrote these words and said that we thought we were good people until we met Jesus. Jesus became for us not only a window into the heart of God, and I love that line, because it reminds us that Jesus is the full revelation of who God is and who God wants to be in our lives. There's no question about that. But what Will Willimon would go on to write was that Jesus was a mirror held up to show us the hard truth about ourselves. Not how bad we were, it's just being truthful with each other. And so these 7 deadly sins were these ideas, these understandings that these are the things that kind of are in the background. And if we're not careful, if we're not really watching and kind of working through all of that kind of stuff, then we will miss this stuff, and therefore we will miss the mark. We'll miss the goal. Well, last week we just kind of reminded ourselves that pride was the very first one we covered, and pride is simply the fact that it's misdirected love, right? I mean, it's that idea and that understanding that literally what begins to happen is we begin to say, well, I've earned it, I've got it, it's mine, I deserve it, all of that kind of stuff. And so we started talking about pride. Well, in order to get going this morning, I just wanted to recap, make sure we were on the same page. But let me tell you a quick little story, just kind of set up where we're going this morning. There were these 2 ancient merchants, right? These 2 different people that they had their own businesses. They were kind of across the street from each other. They literally were the kind of people that they wanted to succeed. They were kind of ambitious, all of that kind of stuff. And literally what they were doing is they were competing against each other. Doesn't really matter what the situation was. They ended up competing against each other, and the rivalry got so bitter. They were constantly degrading each other, talking to the rest of the town people about the other one, whatever it was. The rivalry was so bad that God decided to send an angel down to say, hey, listen, you got to settle this. You got to get rid of this. This is not right. This is not the way I want them to act. And so this angel goes down. He goes to one of the merchants on one side of the street and says, listen, here's what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to give you anything you want. I don't care if it's riches. I don't care if it's long life, if it's wisdom, if it's children. I don't care what it is. I'm going to give you whatever you wish for. But there's one caveat. There's one catch. The guy says, well, what's the catch? He said, I want you to know that whatever you ask for, I'm going to give your competitor twice what you've asked for. It didn't take very long for the guy to look back at the angel and said, oh, I know what I want. The angel said, okay, what do you want? He said, I want you to make me blind in one eye. Some of you guys are going, what, just one eye? But he was so hate-filled towards the other guy. They figured he could live with one eye as long as the other guy ended up blind in both eyes. See, there's something that goes on inside of our world. And so much of that often comes because of this second sin that we want to cover called envy. Envy is that disease, if you will. It's a disease that continues to pervade our existence. It's the direct counterpart to the whole 10 Commandment, you shall not covet. It's one of those things that just kind of is there amongst us, even though we don't often see it, but we talk about it, right? I mean, we can talk about being green with envy. You've probably heard that before. Maybe you've said that before. I thought about this week as I just kind of looked at my phone and I was texting somebody, and sure enough, I was going to use one of those emojis. I thought I would be a little crazy and at least use one of them, you know, kind of thing. And so there was this one, and you probably know it. You've seen it where it's the face and there's green coming out of his mouth, right? Everybody knows what that is. It's not envy, I can tell you that. That's not what's coming out of his mouth. That's something totally different. But it's green. And there's this green with envy, and green means sick. There's something that's not quite wrong. Now, some people would go, well, why isn't there hate? I mean, Pastor, you already listed the top 7. You're talking about envy, and now you didn't even mention, hatred. Is this just kind of a refined, classy version of hatred? Is that really all this is? Well, let me show you what I'm talking about with this envy, because it's a whole different kind of thing. It's on a whole different level. And what I want to do, I just want to ask you what's in common. I'm going to give you, I don't know, about 6, 7 different examples of some Bible stories, all right? We're not going to cover these this morning. I just want you to kind of get a picture of what I'm trying to communicate just a little bit. So I want you to think for just a moment, what do the following Bible stories have in common? The first one is Cain and Abel. You got Cain and Abel, which is the story of a brother who kills his other brother because God liked one sacrifice over another. The first murder that we know about, that we read about. Brother killing a brother. Another Bible story, if you continue on, you get to Joseph. Many of us know the story as Joseph and the coat of many colors, but it's the story of a bunch of brothers who were so upset about their youngest brother because he's the favored brother and got the coat of many colors that they almost want to kill him, but instead of killing him, they just decide that they'll sell him off. Another biblical story is of a guy named David. And David showed up one day and noticed that there was this giant on the other side of the hill and decided that he would take care of it. And so the shepherd boy kills a giant. But what begins to happen is that the leader of the country, the king, begins to try and kill the shepherd boy because the people begin to sing and say, Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. You move into the New Testament. And you get to the story of a guy named Herod. Herod was the king of Israel. And he has these wise men begin to show up one day. And these wise men show up and say, hey, we understand that there's a new king in town. Herod wasn't real pleased with that. And so what begins to happen? Herod decides that all the baby boys 2 and under need to die so that he can keep his spot. You're starting to get a little picture of how this envy thing works out? The Pharisee, that Jesus tells the story about a Pharisee and how a Pharisee and somebody who was kind of a heathen was literally praying, and the heathen was going, Lord, I'm a sinner and I don't deserve anything, but would you please just forgive me? And you've got the Pharisee over here going, and his prayer goes like this, Lord, thank you that I'm not like him. You get to the story of the prodigal son, which many people have heard of, whether they grew up in church or whether they didn't. And it's the story of this son who says, Dad, give me everything that I'm going to have whenever you die. I wish you were dead now, so just give me everything. Goes off, just kind of ruins it all, comes back, and the dad throws him a party. And at the party for his youngest son, who they thought was dead and now is alive, he's back home, he's killed the calf, all of that stuff. And what happens? The oldest son is on the outside. I'm not coming into that party. You never threw me a party. Why would I want to come to a party for him? It even gets into another parable that Jesus talked about, the workers in the vineyard. And there were some that were hired in the early morning, and some in the mid-morning, and some at noon, and some about mid-afternoon, and some late into the afternoon. And when it was time to get paid, literally the one that owned the vineyard paid everybody the same amount. And what happens when everybody gets paid the same amount, even though some worked longer than others? People kind of got upset, didn't they? That's not fair. I don't like that. What in the world's wrong with that? Why would you do that? See, it's amazing how this whole process works. And that's just the biblical stories of just kind of how things begin to kind of hide in the background. You've got the story of Cinderella, who many of us know. And Cinderella, this pure, innocent girl who was beautiful in all sorts of different ways. And her dad dies, or her mom dies, and she gets a new stepmother and a stepsister, and all of a sudden everything begins to go wrong because they're envious of her. If you jump into the late 90s, early 2000s, some of you know and remember a TV show called Everybody Loves Raymond. Anybody remember that? Everybody loved Raymond except for who? Robert. Why? Because Raymond got it all, and Robert got nothing. Robert was always sitting around going, why doesn't I get all of that? Why in the world do I, kind of thing. It was always that. There was even a movie, somewhere along the way, theoretically we've seen it. I don't very much remember it, but it came out in 2019. It's called Shazam. I'm not telling you I endorse it. I'm just telling you that I was doing a little bit of research. And the storyline is this. There's a 15-year-old who somehow gets superpowers, has a super suit, kind of thing, with a cape and the whole bit. And his goal, his task, is to literally fight the 7 deadly sins. It's kind of interesting how our society still talks about these things. 2019, it comes out, he's fighting the 7 deadly sins, and I don't remember much of it, but I just, in the little bit that I did some research this week, there's a moment where he's fighting this nemesis guy that he's been kind of battling the whole time, that just seems to be by his side the whole time. And there's a little battle up in the air because they both can fly and they knock each other down, and they're on the top of a building where they can overlook the entire city. And the 15-year-old who looks like a grown adult turns around and says, wait a minute, I get it. I'm fighting the 7 deadly sins, but there's one problem. And he begins to kind of go through the list, right? You got lust and greed and anger, and you got pride and all of the stuff. But he looks at this arch nemesis guy and goes, but there's 6 of them. I've been fighting 6 of them. Where's envy at? And whenever he says this, it's a great line. In fact, I love this line because when he says that, he looks at this nemesis guy and goes, is envy hiding? Is he afraid to come out? And he starts kind of making fun, saying, listen, well, would the other 6 deadly sins not let him play? Because he's the runt. He's the one that kind of has to hide behind. He's the one that doesn't want anybody to be seen because he will just kind of, it won't look real good. It was an amazing little clip to watch about this whole process of envy. Envy is that sin that we want to look at tonight, or this morning. In fact, if you happen to have your Bibles, you want to turn to Psalm 73, because when we get into Psalm 73, it does an amazing job of kind of showing us some of the realities of envy. I know that the more that you and I deal with envy, there's some mental things that go on. In fact, the more that we have envy and we allow it to sit inside of our heart and inside of our mind, we tend to feel hostile. You'll kind of sense some hostility even this morning. There's resentfulness, there's anger, there's irritability, all of that stuff. We know that the more that people deal with those things, anxiety begins to happen, and we develop prejudices, all that kind of stuff. But there's even physical things that doctors have said that when people deal with envy, it raises your blood pressure, it raises your heart rate. It weakens immunity. Even leads to insomnia in some points. But the big thing to me is that it breaks this relationship. Once again, the goal and the desire is to be like Jesus. That's the goal of our life. And the more that we begin to allow this envy to be a part of us, as you can see as we went through those biblical stories, it was killing this brother and getting rid of that brother. It was making sure that other people sang my praises and not their praises. It's like it divides so many people and divides us and causes so many other issues, but it hides. And it sits in the background. Envy. Psalm 73 will show us kind of the reality of envy, but I believe it will also show us the antidote to envy as well. So let's read that together. This is how it goes. Psalm 73, we'll just start at verse 3. For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. Now, I don't know how old the psalmist is. I don't think he's just talking about older people or younger people, but it's already very quick to say, man, I wish I were like them. I envied the arrogant. How many people envy arrogant people? Don't they just kind of tick you off? Don't they kind of make you mad when somebody's arrogant? Why do they make you mad? Well, who do you think you are? I'm just as good as you are. I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They are free from common human burdens. They're not plagued by human ills. Therefore, pride is their necklace. They clothe themselves with violence. From their callous hearts come iniquity. Their evil imaginations, they have no limits. They scoff and they speak with malice or hatred, however you want to put that. With arrogance, they threaten oppression. Their mouths lay claim to heaven, and their tongues take possession of the earth. Therefore, their people turn to them and drink up their waters in abundance. They say, how would God know? How does God know? How does God know anything? This is what the wicked are like. They're always free from care, and they go on amassing wealth. There's all of these things, and then in verse 13 he says, surely in vain I've kept my heart pure. I love this line. I've kept my heart pure, and I've washed my hands in innocence. It's amazing to me whenever we just begin to work through this simple little psalm, how the psalmist begins to know so much about their life. But that's kind of normal, isn't it? I mean, isn't it amazing what we begin to know about other people? Isn't it amazing what we begin to look and see? And you probably have those people. I mean, it doesn't take very long. There are people in your life, and you just know them. They seem to have it all together. They've got the nice car. They got the car that you've always wanted. Maybe the house that you've always wanted. Maybe they've got the spouse you wanted, or the kids that you wanted. Or maybe they're just arrogant. And you kind of look at them and go, well, who do you think you are? I'm just as good. And all of a sudden there begins to be this internal battle. It's amazing to me how the psalmist knows so much about their life, but it's almost like the psalmist begins to forget. The psalmist almost, as he's beginning to write through this, and it's just like, boom, there it is, and boom, there it is, and I can't stand them, and I don't like them, and I don't want them, and I don't want to be around them. It's over and over and over, all through all these different verses. It's amazing how they know so much about their life, but they forget about their own. In fact, just kind of a quick side note, I just want you to know something. I want you to understand something, that just because someone else has success doesn't mean that you're a failure. Just because you begin to look at somebody else and you begin to see how good their life is, or maybe you're watching social media, because we all know how real that thing can be, right? I mean, no one ever says, my life was the worst today. Very rarely do we see that kind of stuff. It's always the vacations, or it's always the new stuff, or it's always kind of bragging just a little bit. Someone else's success does not mean that you have a failed life. It just means that what you're doing is you're beginning to look at their life more than you're looking at your own. It means that you're beginning to miss out on where you are in your life. I know for me, I mean, it's amazing how easy it is to fall into this stuff. It's amazing how easy, and I know when I was younger and I would see things, and I was so excited about what I was doing and where I was going, and there were good things happening. I remember there were these really good days that we were having, and it was just all sorts of great stuff, and I remember looking around, and I remember seeing all these other people, and things weren't going near as well, but for whatever reason, they were kind of getting some credit, and I'm like, well, look, I'm doing really good, and what about me? And it's amazing how often it's easy to fall into the trap of what about me? And we live in a society. We live in a society of what about me? Notice me. Look at me. Look at how good I've done. And it's crazy, because whenever I begin to think about even us as Christians, we're the ones that are supposed to be so focused on Jesus and the one who gave us life, the one who loves us like no other. And yet what we often do, and I've heard these words before, maybe you've heard them, maybe you've even said them, well, I could own a bigger house if I didn't tithe. If I didn't double tithe, if I didn't triple, and it's almost like we begin to kind of have these spiritual excuses because our life maybe doesn't match up with somebody else, right? I mean, I could have a better business if if I didn't do what they did. I mean, I know how much they pay their employees. I know what they do on the side. If it's going that well, something must be wrong. I've heard people go, do you know how much that car cost? That's ridiculous to pay that much amount on a car because, listen, my money goes to Haiti. That's where my money goes to. I'm not going to buy that kind of car. And what we do, and what envy does, is it begins to hide behind these little bitty barbs, behind these little bitty quips. It's these arrows that we begin to throw out at people that keep us from missing who Jesus is and who wants us to be. I mean, have you ever expected maybe a little bit more blessing from God? Has it ever come to your attention at some point in your life, hey, listen, I give a lot to God. God, I give a lot to the church. And listen, if I give a lot, then I'm kind of expecting a lot. Or maybe, listen, God, I moved for you. I really felt like this is the right thing. Listen, you better work thing. Or listen, I got some education for you. And listen, you better, it's almost like we begin to say that, Lord, you better respect who I am and what I've done. See, envy happens when we define ourselves as martyrs. When we define ourselves as martyrs because it blinds us to who we are and whose we are. We begin to think that it's all about us, and once again, it's all about what I can do. And so what we do is we shoot these little barbs at other people going, well, that wasn't, you got that, but you didn't really earn that. If you just look at me just a little bit. I mean, it's this idea that remember that Jesus is the mirror that is held up so that we can see ourselves and see ourselves in our true light. For who we really are and the things that really begin to come our way, because this is our goal. This is our desire. But there's this culture in our world that says you got to look out for yourself. And envy is so focused on everybody else that it forgets about who they are. The psalmist writes all of this stuff, and he writes about how this person has this, and they have that, the arrogant. I envy the arrogant, whatever, all that thing. But then I love what happens when he gets down towards the end. And he begins to write these words in verse 23. He says, yet I am always with you. He's talking to God. I'm always with you, for you hold me by your right hand. All of a sudden, there's something about the psalmist, and he's been so upset, and everything everybody else gets, and I don't get anything, and they've got it all. And at the end, he goes, but you hold me. You're always with me, and I'm always with you. You're the one that guides me with your counsel. And afterwards, you will take me into glory. Lord, I know that you're with me. I know that you're giving me your wisdom. I know that yeah, they may have it all, but there's something about who you are and who you are in my life. And I know that you're not just leaving me here. I know that you're not just going to hang me out to dry, but you've got a plan. You're the one that's taking me into glory. He goes on to write, whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing that I desire besides you. And this last line, my flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. God, you are what I desire. You are what I want. It's all about you. See, the psalmist begins to turn their vision from what others have to what God is doing in their life. And that begins to be the antidote, right? I mean, it's real easy, especially in our world, it's real easy to start focusing on what everybody else has and what everybody else is able to do and the vacations they get to go on and how everything begins to work out. Everything is great in everybody else's life. And somewhere along the way, what begins to happen is we begin to think, well, my life doesn't measure up and my life doesn't fit in and my life doesn't count. But what happens is the psalmist says, no, I'm not going to fall for that trap. I'm not going to fall into that realm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my eyes. I'm going to turn my eyes onto who God is. I want to focus in on who Jesus is and who Jesus wants to be in my life, because that is where life is found. That is where the best, the most abundant parts of life are found, is whenever I have Jesus. See, when we envy someone, what we're doing is we're magnifying their good fortune while minimizing our own. I got to thinking this morning as I was kind of working through this once again. It's that thing that, you got binoculars, and it's like we begin to have the binoculars here, and we look through the regular way, and we see everybody else, and we can see all the good that they have. But for whatever reason, it's like whenever we turn the binoculars around to look at our own life, and we look so small and so tiny. Envy magnifies what everybody else gets and what everybody else has, and for whatever reason, envy wants to hide behind and say, well, you just don't matter as much. There was a guy, his name was Adam Smith, and Adam Smith put it more like this. He said that envy is that passion which views with malignant dislike the superiority of those who are really entitled to all the superiority they possess. Because what superiority is just a viewpoint. And whenever we get to the viewpoint that everybody else gets it and everybody else gets to have it, whatever it is, then what we do is we lose that sense that we get a chance to know what God is or who God is and who He wants to be in our life. We've been taught in our world and in our nation that contentment in America is about making $10 more than your brother-in-law. That's really what contentment is. As long as I get just a little bit more than they do, as long as people begin to recognize me more than they are, as long as people begin to see me and value me, and the whole time Jesus is going, are you kidding me? I'm the one that values you the most. Envy is that thing that's held best at close range. Very few of us ever go, I really envy Bill Gates. Jeff Bezos, I don't really envy him at all. We don't envy them because they're somewhere else. But envy is that thing that's held very close to us. That whenever we look at our friends or maybe our brother-in-law or sister-in-law or whoever it is, and we go, well, why do they get it all? Why does everybody talk to them? Why does everybody recognize them? It's that thing that just hides behind. And I think that's why I love that little clip I was telling you about. Envy hides. It's so small. And yet it causes such a massive disruption. It thrives on those that are ambitious. It thrives in those that really want to be recognized along the way. That's just the way that envy does. So let me ask you this. Who are you envious of? Now, I know the answer. I know the answer real quick. Some of you go, I'm not envious. I don't fall into that trap. That's not who I am. But remember, what we're doing over this next couple of weeks, and we talked about this 2 Sundays ago, was this realization that if we'll just stop for just a moment, I'm not telling you we all deal with it, but if we're not careful, what we want to do is we'll just run through this and go, oh man, that was kind of neat, because I wish so-and-so would have heard this, and I wish so-and-so would have heard this, and I wish so-and-so would have been there, because they really need to hear it. And if we don't stop and allow Jesus to be the mirror, because He's the goal anyway, then we'll miss out on the best that life has to offer. Who are you envious of? The one with the bigger house? The one with a nicer car? The one whose kids seem to get into the better colleges or seem to get the better jobs? Or they just act better? Maybe it's a marriage that somebody has, and you look and go, man, I wish my marriage was like that. I wish I had a better marriage. I wish I had a better spouse. Maybe it's a superior job. Man, I wish I had a job like that. I wish I had that many weeks of vacation. I wish I had that ability. I wish they paid me that much. I wish. Envy is that thing It's that emotion, it's that attitude where we're maximizing everybody else and we're minimizing what we have. There's a long quote, and it takes up a couple of slides, but Dan Boone is the president at Trevecca Nazarene University just up the road in Nashville. And he's written a book called 7 Deadly Sins. And I really love this quote. And so I just wanted to kind of walk through this at the very end. I just want to kind of close with this. He writes that envy seeks to destroy the good it does not have. Envy pounds nails through flesh into wood. Whose hands are hammering? Cinderella? The father blessed Jacob? Or the merchant across the street? Whose life do you prefer to your own? Look again at the hands. It's your own hands. It's your own that you're wounding. You crucify the life God has given you for the envy of another. Look one more time. Someone has taken your place, gone to the place where you are, where you're dying of lack, dying of emptiness, and his hands have received the nails. The same hands that extend to give you the gift of your own life. Dan writes, stop hammering. Stop hammering. Open yourself to the joy of your own life. Be thankful, even charitable, for you are not robbed. You are rich. You are not cheated. You are cherished. You're cherished. Just to go back to this last verse we read, whom have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart, they may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Would you do me a grand favor this morning? Would you just bow your heads for just a moment? We're going to go back and just pray that prayer. Lord, search my heart. See if there's any wicked way in me. Point out anything in me that offends you. And lead me along the path of everlasting life. You know, this morning, with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, this morning I was actually thinking all week long, that the antidote for envy is gratefulness. It's realizing and recognizing the beautiful life that God has given you. So right where you are, would you just begin to list the things in your own mind that God has given you? It can be anything. Just look around at what God has blessed you with. In fact, would you stand with me this morning? Just take a quick stand. Keep your heads bowed and your eyes closed for just a moment. You know, I've heard it said from time to time that the altar, some people think that the altar is just a place to go when things are bad and when things are wrong. But I thought it might be just a neat place this morning to remind us, a neat time to remind us that the altar isn't just a place to come when things are bad or wrong, but just to come and to say thank you. Thank you for your blessings in my life, oh God. For you are my portion in my life. And if you would want to come this morning and just say, Lord, I want to thank you. Would you come? Let's just praise the Lord. It's not the only place to pray, but it sure is a good place to pray. We'll wait just another minute. Just come and say thank you. For you are my portion. This earth has nothing that I desire. You, Jesus, are the goal. Jesus, you are so good to us. Each and every morning, your mercies are brand new. And so often, it's so easy to get caught up in what everybody else seems to have, and we forget how blessed we are. So, God, I just want to come, and I thank you. I thank you. I thank you for the ways that you've blessed me. I thank you for the ways that you've blessed us. Lord, may we never forget the blessings that you continue to pour out upon us. Each and every day, Lord, whoever it is beside us, around us, just the gift of life. Every day to have breath is such a blessing. Lord, I pray that if there's envy hiding somewhere, maybe it's behind a few little barbs. Maybe it's behind a few social media posts. I pray, Lord, that you would be that mirror to show us the hard truth about ourselves. And Lord, I pray that if there's any of that stuff in us, would you remove it so that we may hit the mark, so that we may become more like you, so that we may experience wholeness in our life. Thank you. From the bottom of our hearts, we say thank you. And now, Lord, I pray that as we get ready to walk outside of these doors, there's a world out there waiting for us to try and influence us. But Lord, may we be influencers. May we encourage those around us, our community around us, our families, our kids, our spouses. May we encourage our grandkids. May we encourage those people in our small group to see your blessings, to know who you are. And may we all join in this journey of grace to grow closer to you. Jesus, I pray this from the bottom of my thankful heart. In your name I pray. Amen. You may go in his grace today.
Take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where I am.